Hey Gary, just doing a not at all timely response to your video about such an important subject when you were talking about criminal justice. And it is Super Tuesday when I'm recording this, so I'm going to actually tie it into Super Tuesday in response to it. That, yeah, there's a lot of fucked up things about the criminal justice system. The biggest one, in my opinion, is the lack of enfranchisement of felons. It varies state by state in America, but depending on where you are a felon, you may or may not ever get to vote again, ever, which is kind of screwed up to me because, in theory, if you're ever going to fix problems with, like, crime and punishment or the judicial system or the penal system, you need to have politicians accountable to the people who are accessing that system, even if it isn't appropriate. For a lot of people will think, well, they give up their rights and all this, that, and the other thing, and it's complicated, I guess. I think voting should be held as a little bit more sacred than firearm ownership of violent felons, for example. Some states are really cool about this. Vermont, you can vote while you're in prison. Like, you don't even have to wait until you're out. You can keep voting, which I think is good because it holds politicians and judges accountable that, you know, they can't be uncompromising douchebags to people who are going to prison because there could be political repercussions of that. I mean, it's unlikely, but the possibility is there, even as remote as it might be. The other extreme example I have on the other end of the spectrum of that is a state like Florida, where you have to get the governor's personal permission after leaving prison to reinstate your voting rights. And he has a meeting once a year where he talks to as many felons are interested in getting their voting rights back, and usually it's a couple dozen, and he gives maybe, 50% of them the right to vote back. And so it's basically next to nothing. None of them get to vote again ever. And it really is a form of disenfranchisement that rarely gets talked about because we're okay with taking away the Second Amendment rights from violent felons, and most felons generally, I think. But voting, whatever. Just who cares? No one pays attention to it. No one thinks about it. And I think that's a big problem with reforming the judicial and the penal system in this country is that felons aren't allowed to have a say in the politics of the penal system. So it's a way, when you consider that, what is it, like 50 or 30% of all African American males will spend time in prison at some point in their life? I mean, think about all the people that can never vote again because of that. Regardless of what their politics are, there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who, in theory, could and probably should be voting on the issues that just aren't ever going to get to because of that. But yeah, anyway, segue that into Super Tuesday. We're into another Super Tuesday race. It's going to be an interesting one for a lot of reasons. Ohio and Florida are up for grabs tonight. On the Republican side, they're winner-take-all for delegates. So they're kind of a big deal in the Stop Trump movement because if he loses both of them, or even just one, which is honestly more likely that he'll lose Ohio, but that's still a toss-up even at that point, he will make it harder for him to have a clear majority to actually win the nomination. And then on the Democratic side, there's just all kinds of shit going on. No one knows how the Midwest is going to break now that Michigan was literally the biggest polling mistake in modern political history, where the average of polls said Bernie was going to lose by 20 points and he won by 2. So it wasn't a huge win. It didn't erase the deficit in the delegates that he needed to make, but the fact that it was so far off means maybe the polls in Ohio are off, maybe the polls in Illinois are off, maybe the one poll in Missouri is off. But even if they all are, if he doesn't win them significantly, with South Carolina and Florida, closing the gap there, it could be a bad night for Bernie. But yeah, it's always interesting nonetheless. One thing, 3 people I talked to from work who are conservatives and live in Chicago, which I know is how is that even possible? But I was talking to them about the race a little bit, and they were saying that they were thinking about not even bothering to vote because they were so weirded out by the state of the race and what Trump was doing to it. And I'm wondering if he's not going to lower moderate voter turnout by lieu of just being the craziest fucking guy in the race. And that's a distinct possibility. I think he could be suppressing the vote of the moderates just because they're so depressed at the state of the race. I don't know. We'll find out soon. I'm not going to make any predictions other than to say it's going to be interesting and I'm going to be up late. Oh, thank you. My daughter is handing me kitchen supplies because she got into the pantry and she likes to hand me things. What's that?
Pickle.
That's not a pickle. Those are bullion cubes, but I don't think she'll know how to say bullion cubes if I try and explain that. Anyway, bullion cubes.
Pickle.
Not even close. So we'll talk to you later, I guess. It's going to be a big night. I hope you're watching, and it should be interesting. So we'll talk again later.